Hello, everybody. This is Glenda with Fralins and Friends Crafts Plus. And tonight I am going to give you an account of my experience with the Red Cross on 9/11. Not what you may expect. First off, I want to let everybody know the wonderful news I heard from Carla today. She's in the hospital, but her daughter was helping her. She's awake, she's alert, she's ornery, which that's our Carla. So her cardiologist has seen her and said she's okay, and they sent her to rehab. So I don't know how long she'll be in a rehab center, but we're just happy that she's still with us, still ornery, and still Carla. So that is the big good news. All evening, we have been watching programs about 9/11, and some of the stories are heartbreaking and then uplifting. The heartbreaking parts are where people have lost loved ones, children who weren't even born yet lost their fathers, and young people who can remember being old enough to know what was going on and who had maybe a parent or somebody in one of those situations. And now here it's 20 years later, and so many of these people have, especially the younger generation, have devoted themselves to some sort of life where they're serving or others, or they're paying it forward or something. And that is the incredible story of how we endure and we revive in this country. We don't just settle and say, okay, that's it. That don't happen. So I'm just going to tell you about my little part, and I don't mean little in the sense of unmeaningful. I mean just my little spot that I had. I was home. I got up and I went out to the living room and I turned the TV on and the news was on. And all I could see was reporters talking about one of the towers had been hit by an airplane. And they were talking about this horrible accident and how we're, and then all of a sudden there was panic in the voices of the reporters, and the cameras were on the towers. And the second tower was hit. And it was then that they realized this was no accident. Now, I called Rosemary, who was our county's Red Cross manager at that time. I said, what can I do? She said, if you could come into the office and take care of the routine stuff, then I can handle the calls. Because the Red Cross is a center where people will call, or they want information. They'll call the Red Cross. And so the Red Cross, I don't know what exactly, was never the manager. I don't know exactly what she did, but I know she took a lot of calls and she gave people information that she could give them. And I mean, she had to play a little bit of a soothing counselor role, because these people are calling. I have family there. How do I find out what's happening? And then after a while, they set up a number of where to call in Falls Church, Virginia. But anyway, there's so much loss. Now, the disaster teams and those who are on the national disaster team, I was on that team. I mean, I was a member of the disaster team. I had my training, but it was best for me to stay here work in the office thousands of miles away from the actual event and keep the normalcy that we could. Because you think about it, that day, I mean, don't ever just take any credit from those who went in and they did the rescuing, and they went in and they breathed that terrible stuff. That had to be tremendously awful. I hear their stories, but I can no way I can even begin to imagine it. But my job that day was to do as my manager asked me to do. Volunteer or not, that's what she needed. And I did a lot of volunteer work in the office, so I knew what needed to be done there. And so she wanted me to do that stuff. And and I'm not trying to say I'm some hero. I'm not. I was just doing the normal thing. Even though our minds may have been on all that was going on there a lot of the time, I'm sure Rosemary's was. And those who did get flown out there or had to drive out there because of the, grounding of all flights, they were there for quite some time. They had to walk a long distance through rubble, and because the cleanup was still going on. What they did mostly was to provide emotional support to those who were actually going into the site, and for those coming out of the site, during the cleanup and stuff, the people who had been in the actual situation. It went on for quite a long time. And we had people out there for a week or so, but they could only stay so long. Then they'd have to go through a debriefing to help them let go and understand what they had witnessed and been a part of. But I don't feel at all like I was not important that day. I wasn't doing a frontline work. I wasn't. And I'm so glad there were people who were, because they're the ones who really deserve a big pat on the back. But I don't think that makes what I did, what teachers did, what doctors in the local hospitals and nurses around the nation, all care workers, anybody did that day just to keep normalcy. Because that's all we could do. And if not for that, what happened after? What would have happened after all of that? What would have happened 9/12 if there hadn't been someone holding down the fort, I guess you can call it? But America started flying their flags again, everywhere. They wanted to have their flags seen. We all did. Because America doesn't melt. Not like that. And we mourned our dead, and there is a memorial there now. Many of them still are suffering with the after effects 20 years later. The PTSD, the disease that came from working in that gut that was filling their noses and throats and whatever. People have died since then because of the effects of all that. But there is something to be said for those who needed to be here, who needed to be at their regular spot, holding things into some kind of normal. No, my story isn't an elaborate, glamorous hero thing. I was a volunteer in the office at our county Red Cross office here in Nebraska, trying to do the normal, keep the records that were needing to be kept up, updating records and stuff that we would have done any day of the week, so that the manager could take care of all the influx of phone calls. They'd call in, or they'd want to know about their loved one or their friend, and how do we find this out? How do we know? And, when people, there was panic, and there was mourning everywhere that day. None more than in New York City or at the Pentagon, but everybody felt it. My stomach was churning when I saw that morning. My mouth fell open. I was talking to my daughter. I asked her if she remembered where she was, and she says, yes. I was in the doctor's office in Lincoln, pregnant with Brandon. That's her son. And I guess the TV was on, and they saw the doctor went ahead and took care of her. The nurses and the receptionists, they did their job. I don't know if any of them or who might have had family in New York that might have been in those Twin Towers or worked near those Twin Towers or at the Pentagon, but people went on about the work of daily life. Nothing remarkable about it. It was simply keeping things going. So my hats are off to everybody who put those flags out that day to show that we were strong. To the people who stayed and worked wherever they were to continue the normalcy, and to everybody who was in those towers or at the Pentagon who either lost their life, lost a loved one there, or the people who were rushing in, the New York Fire Department, their police, their Port Authority. I don't know who I've left out, but we can never be thankful enough for them, or for the people, the men and women who served, who went over to say no more. You can't come and hurt us. We're going to come and stop you. And that's what that was about. It was about stopping them, because it would have been more. So that's it for today. That was my 9/11 experience. But I don't think it was unimportant. I'll see you Monday. I love you all. Have a wonderful day. Good night.